Hello, and welcome to Off the Fence, a podcast where we deconstruct difficult decision making so we can figure out what keeps us stuck, and more importantly, how to get unstuck and make even the toughest decisions with confidence. I'm your host, Karen Covey. I am a divorce and decision coach, as well as a recovering lawyer, mediator, arbitrator, collaborative divorce professional, and author. And I'm here today with Jeanne Gallagher. Jeanne is an investment advisor representative and registered representative with GWN Securities, Inc. She's the founding partner of Seaside Solutions, a firm that uses an educational approach to help their clients create a foundation of financial wellness and freedom. Jeanne is also the host of Discover Rising Tides, a podcast about how the outside makes the inside better. Jeanne, welcome to the show.
Thanks. I'm so glad to be here.
I am thrilled to have you. And I want to just dive in a little bit to education, because I know that's such a huge part of what you do. So your work as an investment advisor starts with education.
Mhm.
Can you tell our listeners a little bit more about what financial education means to you and why you lead with that with your clients?
I think financial education is empowering, first of all, because so many people can feel overwhelmed or head in the sand, the ostrich approach when it comes to finances. And a lot of it has to do with there are just so many moving parts, or just don't understand and don't know who to ask, don't know what to ask or even how to ask. And so what I find is best is if we can start with education first and teaching. And really what it does is it builds a relationship. And that's the most important part, because once you have a relationship, you are more comfortable asking the uncomfortable questions.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Do you find in your work with people, especially in the beginning when you start working with them, that there's a lot of blame and shame around what they don't know that they think they're supposed to know and those kinds of things?
Sometimes it's more embarrassment, because no matter what profession people are in, if they're not in any sort of profession that's financial, or they didn't grow up in a household where money was talked about and how to do things was talked about, then it really can be a piece of inadequacy, because it's one of the most important things, but they really don't know. And they might not be taking action to figure it out, or this could be the first steps.
So what do you think, what elements of financial education are important to you? What kinds of things do people need to know about just to create that basis from which they can start to work?
I think in order to know what you need, or even to figure out what you don't know, it's important to talk about goals. And so for me, my job is to just ask questions and be a sounding board, because quite often people are like, well, I don't know what I don't know, or I don't know what I'm supposed to know. I'm like, okay, well then let's just talk. It's a conversation. And so my job is to really trigger some thoughts for them, or help them figure out, well, what are your goals? What do you need? And let's break it down into stages, because that's really what happens. And it does have to be broken down into stages, because when you think about finances as this big globe or orb, but you don't know what makes it, what its components are. And so let's break it down into components and say, well, what's most important to you? Why? Because the whys are the things that are going to be the motivators.
So how do you help people? Because the focus of this, of what I talk about with people, tends to be decision making here. And so you just mentioned goals. What if people come to you and they're like, well, I don't know what my goals are. How do you help them make that decision? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, it is a decision. You could either go for this, or you could go for that, or you could go for the other. Like, you could have a lot of different goals. How do you help them figure it out?
Well, it's all really all about understanding, where are they today, what's important to them today, and where do they want to be at what point in time. And understanding what is a goal. Is a goal short term? Is it midterm? Is it long term? And when I do classes and when I talk to people about goals should have 3 identifiers. It should have, what is it? It needs a name. And it should have a time, when do you need it by? And it should have an amount. And so now if you put those 3 identifiers on a goal, now you've broken it down into pieces. So now you have an idea, you can almost touch it and feel it. It's more tangible. And you can compare, quite often I compare this process to, exercise or losing weight. If somebody comes to you and they say, I know, right? What is that? You make that, what is she talking about face? You say, well, I want to lose weight. Okay. Why? And what do you really want to do? What's the end game for that? Do you want to do that because you want to be more active? Okay, so now how do you enjoy being active? And so breaking it down into not just the thing that they say that they want, you've got to really find out what's the driving factor. And when you're talking to people in any sort of conversation about their relationships, they say, well, I don't necessarily like this person, or I don't know that we can get along. And so you ask why, right?
Yeah, of course.
It's really the same thing, because what they're saying might not be the root cause or the root piece. And they might not know that. And I don't know it because I don't know anything about them. So my job is to continually ask questions and understand where you're at, and going through, tell me where you're at. Tell me, what do you have in savings and things of that sort, so that we can figure out together where the pain points are. And everything usually comes down to how you spend your money today is a direct reflection of what you're able to spend later in retirement.
Say more about that. I mean, how do you mean? Because let's say I like to spend my money on food. I love to go out to beautiful restaurants and that kind of thing. So I'm spending a lot of money on food, entertainment, whatever you want to call it, right? But let's say I'm also making a lot of money, so that's not a big deal. I can still also save for retirement. How does what I'm spending today then affect my future?
Is it enough?
Okay.
Right. And could you do more? But also, what are your goals between going out to dinner and wanting to save for something? Is there something that, what are your short-term, midterm, long-term goals? And the financial wellness piece comes into play is what you're doing today. I call it spending with integrity, right? If you're spending today with the thought process of later, then that has to be most important.
I love that. I love that idea of spending with integrity. And it sounds like what you mean by that is that your spending aligns with what your values are and who you are as a human being. Am I getting it right?
Yeah, and what you want later, because the responsibility of what we have when we're 65 years old is up to us. Right.
That's true.
And it's also reflective of what we did today. So if you're 60 years old or 65, or, getting into retirement, and you turn around and go, oh, if I had just 20 years ago, I would have this. Well, yeah. So the conversation really is to prevent that, or help prevent that, and step into, we're such an immediate gratification society. We want everything yesterday, and whether it's the newest this or the coolest that, or whatever it happens to be. But we're not, and this is such a general statement, but in most situations, we're not really thinking about what's an extra $500 a month going to do for me later. A lot.
Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds like what you're talking about is the decisions that you make with money need to be aligned with what your ultimate goal is long term, right?
Right. Yeah. So here goes the analogy again. So then, you want to lose weight. Okay. Well, now you're going to have to be more active. You're going to have to pay attention to what you eat, right? And making sure that those are in alignment to hit those goals. And so what you consume today will affect your ability to hit these goals. It's the same thing.
Yep. 100%. That makes sense.
And it's equally as hard.
Yeah, because to your point, people want what they want, and using the money today feels better.
Right. And budget is such a nasty word, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. It doesn't mean that we have to go without. It means that we're living within a plan that's going to achieve a goal.
Yeah. So what do you say? And this might be an unfair or a hard question, but a lot of
come on now.
a lot of the people that I work with are 50 years old plus. I work with people all, of all ages, but a substantial portion is the over 50 crowd, right? And so they're people who are looking at retirement a little bit sooner than you do when you're 20. What do you do if you're 50, 55, 65, and you're like, uh-oh, Houston, we got a problem. There is not enough money right now to retire. Do those people, is there any hope for them? What are some things or decisions that they can make, or things that they can do to keep from, ending up on the street eating cat food?
Oh, yeah, that is a hard question, because, but it's not too late to start something. Right.
Okay.
And because honestly, if you have an inaction today, and 5 years from now, you turn around and go, well, if I had done something 5 years ago, today would be better. So it doesn't necessarily mean that there's a solution to the situation, but there can be an improvement in the situation. And then there's also that self-gratification. If you know that you're working to something to better yourself, how does that make you feel? Because your emotions are the ability to stay on track during a difficult thing.
Yeah, 100%. And, money itself is such an emotional topic. What do I have? What do I earn? What do I spend? All of those are tied up with our values and with our emotions. So when you're working with a client and they're facing all of these money issues, which are really emotional issues, emotional decisions, how do you help them make those decisions so that what they're doing today is in integrity with where they want to be or how they see themselves, you know what I mean, in the future?
It really comes down to, what do they really want? How important is their level of living today versus the thing that they want to work for? I want to buy a house in 5 years. Okay, great. What are you willing to do in order to get there? And what that means is, are you willing to pare down your budget? Are you willing to make some changes?
Yeah.
And that willingness to make a change. And so the difficult part about that, I think, that is the uncomfortableness with, well, if I say that I'm going to commit to this, or if I try to make these changes and it doesn't work out, then I failed. And so I think that those feelings also prevent people from starting.
Let's dive into that, because I think you've hit on something really important, which is the fear of failure, right? And so many people are so afraid of failing that they don't start. And that's true in money decisions. It's true in relationship decisions. It's like they're so afraid of making a change that they're not going to get the kind of relationship that they want, that they never make any changes, and they get whatever they get. So how do you work with your clients to help them move past that fear of failure?
I think that the first step is to understand that they're going to screw up, right? And be okay with it before it happens. Not to say that it's okay to have it happen, but also be okay with it when it happens. And what are you going to do? I call it the rebound rate. How are you going to get back on track? So if you make a mistake, if you miss your budget or you overspend, okay, well, how are you, what communication is going to happen between you and your significant other to address that? And so you have, it's just like relationships, right? So if there's a miscommunication or something happens and it doesn't go as planned, there has to be some sort of agreed way to communicate the realization that this thing happened. Because if you're saying to your significant other, what the heck? Or you're saying to your significant other, oh, this didn't go so well this month. What are we going to do to change? There's a difference, right? And so it really comes down to the permissions that you're giving yourself. And so those conversations can be to yourself, or they could be to your significant other, but it still is, if we actually talk to other people like we talk to ourselves, we would have no friends.
Yeah,
right?
that's true. That's
right?
true.
So really, what are you going to say to yourself if something doesn't go as planned when the first time you try, or the second or the third time you try? Or are you going to say, okay, this is what happened, this is how it could have been better, and these are the changes that I'm going to make going forward? Then you have a better chance of success. The same thing happens with I don't like the word dieting, because really we shouldn't be dieting, we should be changing our eating habits.
I agree.
But if you're and if you decide, well, you know what, I had that cupcake and I really wasn't in my plan. Okay, well, what are you going to do next time? Or how can you adjust your meal plan to allow for these little special things, so that when you have those special things, it's not a slap on the wrist, it's you get to do it. So if you get to do something, and it changes, the 6 inches between your ears are 100% in charge here. And it really depends upon how you are communicating with yourself and communicating with the others that are involved in the situation, and how they're communicating to you.
Yep. I just so resonate with this, and just following the dieting, or the food analogy, we'll call it that way, the eating analogy, which I absolutely love, is so many times, like, you have the cupcake and then you're like, well, I had the cupcake, I might as well eat whatever else I want for the rest of the day because I already blew it, right?
There's no sense. Went to hell in a handbasket. Why not?
Yeah.
And that's the problem. Yeah. 100%. And so the rebound rate there is really slow, because you're like, well, screw that, this isn't going to work.
Yeah.
Rather than saying, oh, hold on a second, if I felt that was necessary, let's look at why. Why was that necessary? Because you felt like you were taking away from yourselves before that, and you just had to do that? Or do you need to incorporate something into your regular habits to make it so that it isn't if you're going to tell your kids not to do something, that the thing that they're going to do is the thing you said not to do.
Of course.
Right. So the same thing happens with us too, right? So if you're going to say, well, I'm going to allow in my meal plan a quarter of a cupcake today, tomorrow, and the next day, and it doesn't cause a problem, and it's not a lack thought process, right? It is because it fits. Right. And so why not? And the same thing happens with budgeting. So with your budgeting, you have to make sure that everything is, that you're covering your basics, right? But also, why can't you budget fun money in there too? So you have a certain amount of fun money to use for the month. And if you use it all the first day, that's your choice. But understand that on the next month, you're going to get it again.
Right. That makes sense. And
so that you're incorporating those things into the plan. And the same thing happens with restaurants. Okay, so you do have a restaurant budget. It's not all or nothing, but maybe it's much less. And then if it's the third week of the month and you have spent your restaurant allocation, you're eating at home. But you've gone into the month knowing that.
Yeah.
It's not the surprise, well, I'm just going to sneak this. No, you're just going to be an adult about it, because that was what was allocated.
Right. And that's the problem with whether you're talking food or whether you're talking money. When you sneak it, who are you sneaking it from? It's just yourself,
right?
You're just taking from your future to spend now, which is okay if that's your choice, but understand you're making a choice, right?
And it all goes down to the emotional commitment of the thing.
Say more about that.
Well, same with relationships, or the same with dieting and or eating and exercise. If you are committed to it, how important is it? Is it important because because somebody else told you, or is it important because deep down inside you know it's going to make you feel better?
Yep. So you're back down not just to the commitment, but also to the motivation. It's your why. Why does this matter to you?
If it makes you, how would you feel when you, not if you accomplish it, when you accomplish it, right? Changing the verbiage is really important. What you tell yourself will listen to. Subconsciously or consciously, it's going to happen, right? So when I do achieve this, how will I feel? And why would I feel that? And what will that get me? What do you picture? And so, I encourage people to use visual tools. Put something on the refrigerator. Remind yourself in a positive way, not a negative way. If there's a goal, put the picture up there.
That makes a lot of sense. I really like that technique. And it's something that I use with my clients when they're going into some sort of a negotiation or a mediation, or they're going to talk with their spouse and try to figure out the money issues or the kid issues or whatever. I always start with, what's your goal? What are you shooting at? Because if you don't know what you're shooting at, you're not going to hit it. Right. Or the chances that you're going to hit it are way, way, way lower. And then having that visual, like if it's your kids that are your motivator, and, in the sense of the people that I work with, it could be, how much time do I get to spend with my kids after a divorce? In your situation, it's like, do my kids go to college? It's like, put a picture of your kids on your phone. And when you're at a negotiating table, you look at that picture and you remember why you're doing this and what's the most important thing and what your end game is. So I love the idea of a picture on the refrigerator or on your phone, wherever you see it, that can remind you of why am I doing this? What's the purpose, so that it's not just, oh, poor me, I can't spend money on whatever I want this week, right?
And then, it goes back to the first question you asked me about financial wellness and education. Why is that important? Because this is why. Because when we're asking people to change their habits, or we're asking people to really think of a goal that they might not have thought was attainable or didn't even understand the process, the education piece comes into play. That's most important, because if you understand more about something, you're going to be more apt to work towards that something.
True.
Right.
That makes sense.
And and so understanding about something can be learning about something. You're going to learn about how it works, but you're also going to learn about the intricacies that happen within it. And so if you can really put that knowledge into play in your own situation, it can become empowering. So now you're feeling that you're in control. And that feeling of being in the driver's seat or sitting in the back seat. So if you use that analogy and you're a backseat driver type of a person, or you're in the passenger seat and your foot's hitting the floor because you would like a break there because you're not in control, the person that's driving is getting ready to brake. They already know what's going on, but you don't know that that's what they're doing. It's the similar situation where if your life and your finances are just driving along, but you don't have a way to either change the course, slow it, or stop it because you don't know what to do. That's where the financial education comes into play. You're going, well, wait a minute. I'm in control here because I know what my next steps are. Yeah. And how much better would you feel if you said, I know what I'm going to be doing next. This is why I'm doing it. Here's what I'm doing. Here's why I'm doing it. And this is how it's going to happen. And if I can teach somebody the tools to make that happen, that's fantastic.
That's really cool. I love what you do. I like your approach
Mhm,
because the whole education-based approach, I think, is so empowering,
mhm.
because people then they know the why of what they're doing. It's like, if I pull this lever, this is going to happen over here, right? If I save this money now, if I invest this money now, this is what I can do in the future, especially once you figure in compounding, right?
Mhm.
So it makes a
Sure.
lot of sense.
Yeah,
Um,
and then what it also does too, that relationship building part comes into play, and it gives the people permission and the ability to call and say, I know you told me this, but I don't remember.
yeah,
So it breaks down the barriers, because as an adult, there's not a worse feeling to be going, I'm supposed to know this, and now I have to go back and I have to go tell somebody I don't understand.
right. Or I have to, yeah, it just nobody wants to feel stupid.
Right. Right.
And the problem is, and I see it in my area as well, is that if someone goes along pretending that they know it because they're too embarrassed, as you said, to ask,
Mhm.
that's when there's problems, right? Because that's when you
Sure.
make mistakes because you don't want to look stupid. And really, just asking the question and not being afraid to say, okay, I don't know this, I need help, and getting the education that you need is so, so important.
Yeah, the
So,
other thing that happens too is that what they're doing could be exactly right, but they're second guessing themselves because they don't have all the facts. And
yeah,
so that's also the important component. It isn't just necessarily for me to teach them something to change what they're doing. Quite often, it could be that I'm teaching them something so that they have the realization that, oh, I think that what I'm doing is on track. And now I feel better because now I know it. So when
yep,
things become more challenging, then they're not second guessing decisions that they've made, but also they have an outlet to be able to call me and go, okay, so I'm not sure I really understand this, let's talk about
yep.
it, because it's really a no judgment zone. I'm not going to be critical because they're calling to ask a question. I'm grateful that they're calling to ask a question.
That's so cool. It's so important, that
Mhm.
people can ask the questions and get the answers and get the information that they need. That's beautiful. I'd like to take us in a slightly different direction. You're probably gonna, hate me for this question, but I
Never,
like.
never, Karen.
Okay. So tell me, what are some of the hardest decisions that you've had to make over the course of your life? Business, personal, or
Personally,
yeah,
oh,
whatever.
good Lord, we don't have enough time. Let's see. I've relocated my business twice to areas where I don't know people. Mhm.
Ooh,
Yeah,
that's
there's a good
big.
one. Yeah,
That is real. How did you do that? Like, how did you make those decisions? Because those are big, and
I have no
they're
idea. Well,
well,
no,
you
I do, but yeah, no, I do know, because the why in the knowledge of what I needed to do was there, and the
mhm.
why of what I needed to do is there, and so I wasn't so concerned about how it was going to happen, because I had
Ah,
the confidence and the knowledge about what I needed to do. And so that was that really overcame the other obstacles of, oh, if so we didn't really get into the conversation of, oh, if I do this and this is going to go wrong. It was more like, okay, this is what we're going to do, and it's going to be hard. And
yeah.
it was, but
But
it wasn't, but every time it happened, it was for the better. But I look back at it and I go, well, that was
that
hard.
was big. Yeah. But that what you're saying is so important for people to hear. It's that just because you made decisions that you knew were going to be hard to implement, right? You
Mhm.
knew that going in, but that's not a reason to not do the thing, right? When you
Right.
know
Yeah.
what you
And
want,
there were, mhm. I was
yeah,
going to
you
say
know
that
what you want and
logistically, that it
why.
wasn't like I was moving to, when I moved my business, I didn't go to the next town. I relocated a few thousand miles. So, right.
Yeah.
So go big or go home.
And that's awesome. And that's exactly the kind of decisions, that we talk about here.
Mhm.
And it sounds like what your process, whether it was a conscious process or not, was like, what do I want and why is it important to make this change? And that
Right.
when you have the clarity that you need on those two pieces, the how am I going to ever do this kind of, it lowers on the importance scale,
Mhm.
and you just figure it out as you go along.
Yeah. And the same thing happened to, personally, not just business wise, but personally, 2 years ago, we decided to buy a piece of property on the other side of the country. So
Wow.
I know, right? So, and some people are like, why would you do that? Well, because I want to go home.
Yeah,
Right. And
that's
so not
easy.
necessarily permanently, but I want to have some sort of connection back to New England. And so through that, when we first did that, in the back of our minds, we know here's what we want to do with this, but didn't have any idea how that was going to happen, but didn't get lost in all of those I don't knows, because the that's where the emotional piece came into play. And that can also get you into trouble too. You can make these emotional decisions and they're like really could be setbacks. So
Yeah.
you have to balance that. Well, I really wanted to, so that's why I did it. No. There were some facts behind the decision of really wanting to. There was some work that happened behind that. It's just like in social media, when you look at these things and people look all beautiful or things look really perfect. Well, you don't see that. That's only a flicker of time when a camera clicked, right? So there's all other
Yeah.
stuff in the background. So yeah, you can't take a statement as for just what it is. But you start making these steps, and now we have this big goal of doing something there. So now we're really focused on that. But it also, that focus or that big goal also brought clarity to what I needed to do today in order to attain that big goal.
That makes total sense, because I see so many times people who are facing a big decision or a major
Mhm.
life change get caught in the weeds. It's like, well, how is
Mhm.
this going to happen and that going to happen? And if you do that, you're toast. You're done. It's over.
Mhm.
You'll spin in circles for who knows how long, right? And you never make progress. But it's about, and I don't think what you're saying, I don't get the sense from you that it's about telling people to make a rash decision,
Oh no.
but it's about being really clear on what it is that your end goal is and why it matters to you. And that if you've got those two pieces in place, you can figure out the rest, right?
Can you get
Versus,
excited about the thing enough to make changes of what you're doing today and stick with it?
yeah, yeah, that makes total sense.
Because
So
the clarity comes after that,
yeah, I mean,
or with it.
yeah, I think it's all tied up together.
Mhm.
That you can't, if you're doing something and you're not clear about what it is you want, it's like I tell people, if you don't know what you're shooting at, you're not going to hit it, or at least your chances of hitting it are substantially lowered. And
Mhm.
that's true whether you're talking about a career change, a change in your relationship, money, anything. It's like you have to understand what you want and why you want it.
Mhm.
And then the other pieces, you can work with those. You're not going to and the other thing is, you're not going to have all the answers up front.
Right.
Like the heavens don't open and something falls, a perfectly complete plan falls into your lap and you go, oh, I just have to do this and this and this. It's not like that, right? But if you know which direction you're going in, you have the ability to create that plan. It sounds like that's what you're
Yeah.
saying.
And if you're making a decision or you're making a change, but you're making this change but unwilling, you're setting a goal but unwilling to make changes in what you're doing today to hit that goal, you have to take a look at it and go, well, how much do I really want that? What am I really willing to do in order to get that to happen? You can't just wish it to happen.
Yeah.
There's a difference between wishing and manifesting.
Yeah.
Right.
That
So
makes
if you're
total sense.
wishing it to happen, but you're not taking any action towards the goal, then
It's not going to happen.
nothing.
Yep. I agree 100%. So let me put you on the spot again and ask you, what do you think is the best decision you've ever made?
Oh, there's a lot of lists of them. And that the corny response is, oh, my children, which is true. But that I think that that the I think that some of the best decisions are the ones that have gotten to me where I am today. So meaning the 2 bouts of relocation. There's so much that has happened, right? So there's so much that has happened since we made changes in 2005 when we relocated the first time. And there's so many things that have happened because of that. Both of our kids met their significant others because we did these relocations a couple of times. And so I think that we wouldn't be where we are today if we hadn't taken action when it felt most important.
That, you know what, that's really beautiful. And I think it's an important point too, because you can't, so many of us try to guess where we're going to be or what will happen if, what if.
Mhm.
And when you're on the other side of the decision and you can look back and you can say, that was a good decision. Sometimes you're not going to know in the moment, well, is this 100% the right decision? Am I sure it's going to work out the way I want it to work out? And the answer is, it might not.
Right.
But you might end up being in a better place anyway, right?
Mhm.
Life has a funny way of working itself out. And your perspective in hindsight is always different than it is when you're facing the thing and you're like, this is so big, I don't know how I'm going to tackle it.
Right. And those big decisions, behind the scenes of those big decisions, there were days that it wasn't going well, right? There's always that. There's the struggles that happen. Everything isn't all sunshine and rainbows, right? It's the hard work that helps build the situation into something that should be.
Yeah, 100%. And it's the ability to keep going and doing the hard work because you know what you're doing and why you're doing, like, you know what the goal is, you know why you're doing it. And that helps sustain you
Mhm.
when you have the hard days, because there's always going to be hard days, like no matter what you're doing or where you're at, period, full stop.
Yep.
So,
and if you have the clarity to work through that because you know where you're headed, it makes the hard days easier.
100%. And it's when you don't have that clarity
Mhm.
that it gets really, really awful, because you say, I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what I'm doing. Like, and that's when you start to feel hopeless and like you're never going to make progress and you're stuck. So, Jeanne, this has been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Can you do me a favor and tell our listeners where they can find you, where they can connect with you?
Sure. So 2 places. So the website is seasideSolutions.net, and for the financial services business, and for the podcast is discoverrisingtides.com. You can find my contact information on both of those, and email address is jgallagher@seasideSolutions.net, but it's all on the websites.
That is awesome. Thank you so very much for being our guest here today. This has been a great conversation. And to all of our listeners, if you liked what you just heard, if you enjoy the conversation, please like the video, like the podcast, and subscribe. And with that, we will talk to you again next time. Bye for now.